Good afternoon. This is a continuation of the Louisville Metro Council budget hearings on the FY22 capital and operating budgets. Today is May 25th. It is 4:02 p.m. And today we will hear from the Louisville Free Public Library. The meeting is being conducted by video teleconference pursuant to KRS 61-826 and in accordance with Senate Bill 150. Some committee members are present in chambers. I'm the committee chair, Bill Hollander. The vice chair, Kevin Kramer, is also here with me in chambers, and others are attending virtually. Also in attendance are other council members who are not members of the committee and people making presentations. Since today's meeting involves a discussion or presentation for informational purposes, we will not suspend the meeting if an individual member's feed is disrupted. We will work to resolve that issue, but the presentation will continue. If we experience any technical difficulties that affect the public's ability to see the meeting as a whole, we will suspend the meeting while we attempt to resolve the issue. While the meeting is suspended, all discussion of public business will cease and no action will be taken. If after 10 minutes the issue cannot be resolved, the meeting will stand adjourned. Present with us, and I know we'll have some other members joining us, present among the council members are Councilmember Piagentini, Armstrong, Arthur, McCraney, George, Engel, Purvis, Winkler. I believe that's it presently. We have two hearings today. The Louisville Free Public Library is scheduled from 4 to 5, and Parks and Recreation is scheduled from 5 to 6. We'll use the same format that we've been using. If we, in the probably unlikely possibility that we would finish the library early, we'll move directly into Parks and Recreation. We'll ask each director to make a short presentation, and then we will move into questions, ask people to hold their questions to 2 or 3, and then move into the back of the queue so that everybody will have an opportunity to get their questions answered. The director of the Louisville Free Public Library is Lee Birchfield. Lee, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Chairman Hollander. I'll share my presentation out for you all. Bear with me one moment. So you should all be able now to see my budget presentation PowerPoint show. I do have just a short presentation for you this afternoon, hitting the highlights of the last year. First, because I know everyone is curious to know, I'm offering an update on the renovation of the Middletown Library at its new location at 12556 Shelbyville Road. The top row of pictures that you see here on the screen are the existing building. First, an exterior shot, and then a couple of photographs from inside. You can see that the demolition work to remove a lot of the interior walls that had been added, floor finishes and things like that, as well as some drop ceiling, has been completed. We're ready for the construction work to start in earnest to get the library ready for us to move in furniture, lay carpet, and put in shelving and books and computers. Across the bottom of the slide, what you'll see are some 3D renderings from JRA Architects, whom we've been working with on the interior design. Most recently, we met with the interior design consultant, and I think we've got a design for that library which is going to make a really attractive, inviting, comfortable space for the residents of Middletown. One feature I'll call your attention to that I'm really excited about, and it's mocked up here, so it could end up looking a bit different from this. But in the lower right-hand corner there, you see a little play nook for kids with a hole cut in the wall where they can go inside. There are ramps and things that they can go up on the inside. So there's a little porthole that one child is looking out right now. There's another half moon shape hole or opening window in the wall, and another child is standing in there looking out. And we all know that kids love to be up under a table, hiding in a clothes rack in a department store, anywhere that they're just sort of completely enclosed even if it's just a cardboard box in the floor. So we think that's going to be a real attraction for the kids in the children's space there. So COVID-19 caused us to make a number of adjustments to library services over the past 10 or 12 months. We redirected a lot of our funding for materials to purchasing digital collections. Since we were closed to traffic completely for a couple of months and then opened back up with curbside only, we knew there wouldn't be the same kind of demand for physical materials, and we expected the demand to increase for ebooks and other digital materials. We were right about that. I'll show you some numbers in a moment. We also shifted our programming energy to doing programming via Facebook. We found that these programs we were offering digitally were not only popular at the time that they were offered live, but we left them up available as recorded events. And we found that a large number of people also would come back and watch them after the fact. One of our big concerns for summer reading last year was that our libraries were closed and we were asking children in the community to read 10 books over the course of the summer, but they didn't have access to the library to borrow those books. So we worked with the Library Foundation, secured some private money, and were able to purchase and give away over 50,000 items in the community. And I just get really excited when I talk about that, because that is 50,000 books that went home with children over the course of last summer, and those books are still there. Maybe a younger sibling is now old enough to read it. Maybe it's a picture book that has become a favorite. And so we were just really excited to do that. And we are still giving away books this year as part of summer reading, but we don't have quite as many as we had last year. Last year, we also decided that since our programming was all going to be virtual, that people who did not have access to the internet or computer technology would not be able to participate in that or even be a spectator at that. So we worked with a local television station and we produced 10 episodes of a 30-minute summer reading television program, which aired on Saturday mornings. If you haven't seen any of those episodes, they are available on the library's YouTube page and are just delightful. It really came off very well and was such a success that we're going to do it again this year. We also expanded Wi-Fi access hours, and I really have to give a shout out to Councilwoman Keisha Dorsey, who started asking questions about the availability of our Wi-Fi. And over the course of a few conversations, we were able to reach the conclusion that it would make a lot of sense to make Wi-Fi available during more hours of the day. So we went from having our Wi-Fi available at library locations from an hour before they open until an hour after they closed, to having Wi-Fi access available from sunup to sunset or to an hour after a library closes, whichever is later, 7 days a week. And that was really important to all of the stakeholders involved, because we know that people were struggling to find internet access during those times when the library was closed. And then one of our biggest changes was we started offering curbside delivery of items. If you didn't participate in that at the library, but you did at any of the great restaurants here in Louisville, you know exactly what this looks like. You have to place your order in advance, so people needed to call the library and talk to a staff person, or they needed to go online and place holds. And then they could call the library when they were notified that their items were ready for pickup. They could call the library and make an appointment to come and park in a designated spot, and our staff would take the items out to them. The combination of the increase in digital materials available and the curbside delivery really was effective. This first slide is actually a graph showing the ebook circulation at our library from May of 2019 through April of 2021. So 2 years worth of data. The most recent 12-month period versus the 12-month period prior to that, our ebook circulation is up 63%. You can see it kind of dips back down. You probably can't read the bottom axis legend, But when we started reopening our libraries and letting people come in, and even when we started doing curbside, we saw some declines in that at the end of summer reading as well. So it was initially up over 100% from the 12-month period to the 12-month period prior, but that has tapered off a little since we've reopened. Some other significant metrics I wanted to call your attention to. Over 2.6 million items were checked out from the library during the last 12 months, and that's really remarkable given that our libraries were closed or limited to only curbside pickup during that period. We issued 21,653 new library cards, and just since we've reopened for browsing of our collections and computer use, we've had over 104,000 people visit the library. We had 46,000 people participate in a virtual program, and through our book giveaways, which we collaborated with JCPS in many instances at their meal giveaways, we reached 22,598 people with outreach contacts and book giveaways, and gave away over 50,000 books. And then one surprise that we were able to accomplish this year, it hadn't really been in our plans for this year, but we started having increasing difficulties mechanically with our existing children's bookmobile. And over the course of the year, we were able to raise money to buy a new children's bookmobile. So presently, our operating status, we are open at all locations at reduced capacity, but we will expand that capacity along the governor's timeline. Summer reading officially starts June 1st, but our summer reading kickoff event is planned for June 5th. It will be an outdoor, in-person event at the Northeast Regional Library. We're very excited to have people back at the library for in-person programming. We'll also start taking reservations for meeting rooms starting in June. We've got a little cleanup to do to get all of our meeting rooms ready and to get the reservation system back up and running. And we'll also start doing in-person programming at all of our branches starting in June. Right now, not all of our computers are still reopened to the public, but we will get the rest of our computers reopened as soon as we can take care of the configuration work that needs to be done to accommodate that. So we're buying a new children's bookmobile. After the flood that damaged 3 bookmobiles that were owned by the library at the time, we replaced a full-size, we replaced 2 full-size children's bookmobiles with 1 smaller transit van bookmobile, and we replaced our full-size adult bookmobile with an even smaller van that is used to do outreach deliveries to mostly senior living centers. So this will be our first time to have a larger, more full-size children's bookmobile since the flood. And I'm really excited about it because it's going to give us the ability to have a lot more books on board when we go out to a school or daycare center or to a neighborhood event. It's going to allow more children into the bookmobile where they can read and browse the books. And we will still continue to operate our current bookmobile for as long as it is mechanically feasible for us to do so. So in some cases, we'll actually be able to double up and do some outreach into the community from 2 bookmobiles at the same time. And I'm looking forward to the impact that we can have in the community once that new bookmobile is up and running and operational. We're anticipating we'll have it by the end of the calendar year. The delivery is going to be delayed a little bit by the same computer chip issue that is affecting all other aspects of the automotive manufacturing industry. But we will get it back in as quickly as we can, and I'm really looking forward to the inaugural bookmobile trip out into the community. So what does fiscal year 2022 hold for the library? Well, with the approval of Metro Council, we'll eliminate overdue fines. And to me, this is a significant move for us to make. When you look at the data around fines at our library, it's clear that the overdue fines that we've been charging are impacting the people who are least able to pay those kinds of costs. And as a result, over 50,000 people are cut off from using our library because at some point they returned materials late. In many cases, that might be a person who was in 5th grade at the time, and now they're in 8th grade. And so for 3 years, they've owed us overdue fines that they can't afford to pay and have not been able to take materials out from the library. We'll also increase bookmobile services once we have the new bookmobile in place, and we'll be able to visit 2 locations at the same time. We'll continue to pursue capital improvements where resources permit. We have a number of sort of in-progress capital projects that we will continue to work on, and some that we've not really started on, like the renovation of the historic home at Northeast. And so we will continue to look for both public and private dollars that we can use to pursue those projects. We're also going to leverage American Rescue Plan funding to expand services and collections. So apart from the money that has been allocated to Louisville Metro, there are a couple of sources of funding from the rescue plan that are specifically designated for libraries or schools and libraries. One of those is the Emergency Connectivity Fund, which is being administered by the FCC. We know that this money can be used to help provide broadband access to members of our community who don't have it. What we don't yet know is exactly what that will need to look like. So we have a team that consists of a staff person from the library, a staff person from the Metro Department of Technology, and someone from JCPS, so that we can coordinate our efforts to maximize the amount of funding we get, but also to make sure that we cover all of our bases in terms of all of the different ways that we can try to get broadband access out into our community more. The second of those sources is money from the Institute for Museum and Library Services that has been allocated to the Department for Libraries and Archives at the state. They are still working on guidelines for the application process and determining eligibility. So how much money will our library be able to get, and figuring out what the most important uses of that funding will be. So we're awaiting some guidance on them to find out exactly what we'll be able to use that for. But it sounds like at least one possibility would be that we could use that money to enhance our collections by buying more physical print books or more ebooks. And we need to get to work on a new master plan 2040. The library's 2008 master plan looked out 11 years. So the final year really contemplated by that plan was the 2018-2019 fiscal year. So I've already had some initial conversations. We would have already started were it not for COVID, but I will start working with the Library Advisory Commission's Planning Committee, as well as members of the Library Foundation, the staff and the board at the Library Foundation, as well as other stakeholders. And I expect that will include elected officials, Metro Council members, members of suburban city governments, and we will put together a plan for what our library system will need to look like if the Louisville Metro Plan 2040 succeeds in its objectives. So that's my presentation. I apologize, I went a little over time. I get excited when I talk about the library, but I'll be happy to take questions if you all have questions.
Thank you, Lee. Thank you to everyone on your team. I completely understand why you get excited, especially having survived a year like this. We've been joined by Councilman Triplett and Councilman Fox since last called the roll. I have a couple of questions. When you look at the total funding, first there was carry forward funding in fiscal year 21, which would carry forward from fiscal year 20. So when you look at the total funding, it looks like there's less money, I think, in the FY22 year than in FY21. That's mainly because of the carry forward funds. My first question, though, is do you have everything you need in this budget to operate under a normal schedule, including the new operation of the Middletown Library, whenever that's open and running?
Sure. I'm confident that we do. So this budget was put together by looking carefully at not what we expected it would cost to operate the library during the current fiscal year, but what it actually cost, taking into account things like the 2 months when our staff were furloughed and some of our reduced costs. So I believe that we do have that funding that we need. You phrased the question in a particular way where you said, do you have everything you need? And well, so of course I would say we never really have everything we need, but I am confident that we have enough money in our operating budget to deliver the services we want to deliver this year.
Well, when I get back in the queue, I'll be talking about how you rank among benchmark cities. I've done that for 6 years in a row, and I sure won't miss the opportunity this year. Let me get to one specific line item in the budget, and that's books. So it appears that there's a reduction in that line item of, $250,000 roughly, $230 maybe. You've supplied us with some information that may be some supply chain issues, and there may be future amounts from the Library Foundation. But my question is, it's alarming to me to see a reduction in a book line in the budget. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So I think there were a couple of things that have been happening both at the end of last fiscal year and at the beginning of this fiscal year, which is that we knew that we needed additional money to spend on materials, and we were getting that from a couple of different sources, one of which is, of course, the Library Foundation's new book endowment. So we spent more over the last 12 months than we would spend out of an operating budget in a normal year. The second sort of difference in our book budget right now is that over the past couple of years, we have been spending a good deal of capital money purchasing collections for new libraries that were opening. And again, this year, we are busily ordering books that will go into the opening day collection for the Middletown Library, and those may not be reflected in our operating budget. That said, there's never really a budget where we have enough money to buy all of the materials that we need to buy to serve our community. One example of that I would give is that if you look at the materials budget for peer libraries, but even if you look at the materials budget for a peer like the Lexington Public Library that serves a much smaller community, they typically will have almost as much money to spend on materials for their collection as we have to spend on materials for our collection, even though we have a much larger population. So I have been having intense conversations with the Library Foundation about some temporary assistance to make sure that we can purchase the materials that we need. I'm confident that we will be able to buy the materials that we need to maintain the level of service we've been providing. We'll continue to adjust how much we spend on ebooks versus how much we spend on what I call physical materials. But the number that's in there right now with the commitments that we have from the Library Foundation for next year, I think we'll be all right for this year, but it is part of that larger sort of operating budget conversation.
Councilman
Chairman, I'm sorry, Chairman, just to follow up, it's Daniel Frox from the Office of Management and Budget. Wanted to relay, just to kind of echo Lee's sentiments. There's also a fall off in the foundation donation revenue line, but that will certainly be written up if more foundation donations are received. But we did that based on trend. The original budget for FY21 was $1,076,000. We have a $645,000 budget for FY22 from foundation donations within operating. That's corresponding to the book decrease. And that could go into the book line or be used to buy books. Is that right, Lee? Generally it is. I'm sorry. Generally it is as received. We will be purchasing more books if we receive more than the 645.
Okay. Thank you. Councilman Piagentini.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, Director Birchfield, I appreciate you highlighting the Middletown Library, of course. We're really looking forward to it. Any sense of timing? Just curious if you think we'll be able to get it in before the school year starts or not, or is that cutting it too close?
So there was a timeline included in the winning bid from our vendor, and that timeline would not have it open before JCPS starts classes in the fall. I'm a little hesitant, as always, to try and name a particular date, but what I've been telling people is late summer. So I don't think we'll make it by JCPS school year, but hopefully it won't be much longer after that.
That's great.
One of the things that we always have to contend with is once the building's handed over to us, we have to get the shelving in and receive the material and get all the collection shelved. So it'll be close, but I don't think we'll make it by the school year.
Okay. Keep me posted. Obviously, we want to make a big splash in the community. There's a ton of pent-up demand for it. And to your point, that it's walking distance to Height Elementary and Eastern High School. So there's going to be a lot of the public school system is going to want to know about it, and I'm sure their kids are going to benefit from it significantly. I'm going to skip my question about the overall budget. I think Chairman Hollander sort of hit on that already. I'm going to channel, and I hope I'm not stealing too much of Councilman Engel's steam here, but I know this has been a conversation going back to 2 years ago during the budget that we did then, and plus I know Councilwoman Green, and I have people that I know who are very interested in the Parkland Library, so I'm going to highlight Parkland and Fern Creek. Thoughts, plans, where are we in looking at the reopening of these two locations?
Sure. So the reopening of those two libraries is not in this budget. I know that people love libraries and everybody wants one in their neighborhood, preferably within walking distance. And I would love to accommodate every one of those desires for a library. We do hope that there will be some one-time money, federal stimulus money, that can be used to do some things, but that doesn't really solve the long-term operating budget issues. So because of that, the Library Advisory Commission Planning Committee and I are really staying focused on the 2008 Library Master Plan. And there are several projects from that plan that have not been completed as prescribed. One of which is to build a new freestanding library in Shively that would be larger and able to handle the demand that we already see at the Shively Library. And the other is improvements at the Portland Library. So we're kind of focused on those. And I'm happy to have conversations with folks about the potential for some stimulus money that might be able to do something at other locations.
So, a quick couple things here. Are you saying the Fern Creek Library was contemplated in the current master plan, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, I'm not bringing up libraries here that aren't, part of the master plan or contemplated as part of the thing. I mean, it was closed due to a budget issue, right? And now we have a community that and I have the data, we're just waiting for our data experts to spice it up to finish the report before I can release it. But I've got data showing massive movements of people into those communities from across the county. And they're currently without a library. So let me bring it back to your comment about funding in general. Consider this a question, maybe just consider this a comment. I am completely underwhelmed by the lack of boldness in this library budget year. It's almost become a joke to some degree between Chairman Hollander and I about trying to find things we agree on. But here it is, right? This is like one of the things that, and when Chairman Hollander does his spiel on spending per capita related to libraries, I applaud it. It's one of the things that you see that for the last several years, every year I've been on council has moved money into the library budget every year. The mayor comes with this proposal, it's X, and we always fund it X plus Y, right? We've done it every year now. And we see, millions of extra dollars being spent in this budget on, and even President James pointed this out, social programs that are completely lacking in outcomes, lacking in planning and proposals on how it's going to be executed. And meanwhile, I'm looking at a budget here for the library that, okay, yeah, we're waiving late fees. I support that. That's terrific. But to me, that's dancing around the edges here. We have been asking, and I think pretty consistently in a bipartisan way, for a bold library plan. We believe in it. We believe this is critical, built infrastructure and critical infrastructure for lifelong learning for our residents. And I see no plan for Fern Creek. I know Councilwoman Green has been focusing on Parkland and getting that opened. And I know there's a lot of support for members of the Library Foundation on that library. You talk very eloquently about renovations to the main library and things like this, but I'm looking at the plan historically. I see capital appropriations historically for the library 4, 8, 17 million in some of these old budgets, 600,000 this year. I mean, it just seems to me that this continues to be under prioritized in the scope of this entire budget. And consider this a plea to the rest of the Metro Council that we continue to prioritize this, both in capital and, to your point, Lee, that capital, great, we open a library, we need to operate it, right? It needs to be both. I 100% agree. But this is one of the areas of infrastructure that's in demand by our constituents, provides a terrific service to our constituents. And yet I'm just really underwhelmed by the boldness of a year when we're putting quadrupling spending on programs where we have questionable, if any, definitions of outcomes or what the heck those programs are going to achieve, when we know what we can achieve with opening these libraries. So, a plea to my colleagues that, and Lee, we can work offline about what we, if we were to say, look, we can find another $1 million, $1.5 million, capital versus operating, what would you prioritize? I think that's my ask for you. What would you prioritize if we are able to do what we've done in the past, which is move more money to libraries? So I think I would love to see that from you, prioritize both on the capital and operating side. And secondly, again, when you do this, which is great, I think it's great that you're about to redo this master plan and plan it for 2040. But my other ask for you there outside of this is to account for the new census data. There have been tremendous, I have some of the data on my computer, tremendous movements in people across demographics all over the city. And I think we need to reevaluate this library master plan to reflect that, right? And to see, where things should be located because of those population movements. So again, just a bit of a takeaway there. So Lee, if you don't mind, glad to hear your comments now, but if you don't mind afterwards, if for every, let's call it $1 we can add, what would you prioritize as the library director on operating and capital to help expand and improve the library system beyond what you have proposed in this budget? That would be terrific. Thank you.
Councilman Triplett.
Thank you, Chairman Hollander. And Lee, thank you for being with us. Piazzantini's always a hard act to follow. I don't know if my simple question may pale in comparison after that fine, bold statement. I was just going to ask about our culture pass, Lee. That's not really a budget question, but more of operational and our programming side of things. I'm glad to see that we are again, as we should be, a part of the Culture Pass program. we're keeping data and numbers on that, right? We track that when students and when anybody takes advantage of the Culture Pass. And do we use those numbers into factoring in with books, other programs, and other budgetary items? Can you answer anything?
Sure. So we do track all of the participation in both the summer reading program and the Cultural Pass. And the data that we collect around the Cultural Pass is primarily then handed off to the Fund for the Arts, and they use that and evaluate that with respect to the cultural partners that are participating in that programming. What we're really looking at the library is the summer reading statistics, but we do keep track of how many cultural passes were distributed, and I could run a report to show how many cultural venues a student or a child in our community may have visited during the course of the summer. So we have all of that data, but a lot of that data is really utilized more by the arts and culture community than by the library. But all of it, yes, we do have impact data on that.
And I guess I should have known that. And but they track the data for us, the Fund for the Arts.
Well, it's actually it's actually the other way around. We track the data for them. Okay. The Cultural Pass and Summer Reading are both tracked through a software system called Beanstack. So that's really one of the reasons why the library is the distribution point for the Cultural Pass. People come in, get the Cultural Pass, we make sure they're entered into the system, and then we receive information from the venues about who's visited, or the patron comes in and tells us that they went to, or they can actually go in and mark it themselves to say that they went to certain.
And we can use that data to help determine our course for new books, Wi-Fi, other services, and programs.
Yes, we certainly do mine the summer reading and patron data. One of the things that is most helpful about it, we used to get paper forms that people had written their 10 books on, and we would go through and manually count zip codes, and all we could really tell you is this many forms from this zip code were turned in. Now we actually have data that we can mine and map to show where participants in these programs, both summer reading and Cultural Pass, where their address is in the community and how engaged they were in those programs. It's really a tremendous improvement.
Very good. Very good. Director Birchfield, thank you for your work. Appreciate you being here. Thank you, Chair.
Councilwoman McCraney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, hello, Director Birchfield. I'm excited because you mentioned that you will be opening up the meeting rooms in June. I'll be paying you a visit in July with several other people that are excited about coming for a tour for the regional libraries. So I'll be calling to make a reservation. But I wanted to also commend you on an extraordinary job that you've done during this pandemic. It has not been easy, and you have made some accommodations for people to still access the library. And I under the circumstances, I think you could not have done a better job. So thank you for that. So with that said, can you tell me about the culture and the perhaps the mood of the workers? Are they all back? Will they all be invited back? What's going on with the people in the library?
Sure. So as far as being furloughed or returned from furlough, all of our employees are back from furlough. They've all been back since mid-July. So we don't have anyone who's furloughed. We do have some staff who are off on some sort of COVID-related leave, and that might be Federal Medical Leave Act because they're caring for someone else, or because they have a child care issue that hasn't resolved yet. So we do still feel some impact in terms of our level of staffing, and it's one of the reasons that we're not quite back yet to our normal operating hours. In terms of the mood of our staff, it has been a really hard year for our staff. In addition to the furloughs, and you've read the stories about the issues with the unemployment payments from Frankfurt. And so many of our staff, while they were furloughed, were also struggling to try to get unemployment payments. They're all back now, but we're all feeling the stress of this last 12 months. So we've been trying to do some things to build morale, and just one little example of that, the Library Foundation made a contribution to the library so that every employee could get a free summer reading t-shirt. Ordinarily, because you can't spend library money to buy t-shirts for all the employees. Ordinarily, staff have to order their own summer reading t-shirt. And we've heard from a lot of people that even that little thing really made a big improvement. We've also been meeting on a monthly basis, and sometimes more often than that if we needed to, with the union leadership that represents our hourly employees. And those conversations started out, as you might imagine, much more fractious with the furloughs and the recall from furlough. But over the past few months, we've seen some, I think, really significant improvement in the sort of positive cooperative tone of those conversations. So, I think we're almost at the end of this pandemic that's been so hard on us, and I'm really optimistic about what the future looks like. But right now, yes, we're trying to encourage all of our staff to be gracious with themselves and their coworkers, because this has been really a trying time for all of us. Sure. So mayoral appointees, and I'm not really the HR expert here, but mayoral appointees, when they are reviewed, I believe would be reviewed by the mayor. Okay. I think that probably happens on an ongoing basis.
Okay, well, it just so happened that I was reviewing all of these documents, and I did notice that it says the Library Advisory Committee is responsible for your review. And so I was wondering how that went, because, in my mind, you've done a yeoman's job, but so.
Well,
who knows?
Well, thank you. So I believe that you're referencing the ordinance that created the Library Advisory Commission. And we spend a lot of time looking at that with those commissioners. And what it says is that it lists a couple of specific responsibilities that the Library Advisory Commission has that have to do with oversight of money that has been bequested to the library, and with oversight of the collections. And then it says the Advisory Commission can also engage in other activities at the request of the mayor, and it lists a review of the library director as an example of that. But I don't think that's been requested of them, and so I don't think they've done that.
Okay. Well, give yourself an A. Thank you for being.
Question about number 4. It talks about the increase of circulation for library materials at West Region branches. You want to increase that by 5% during fiscal year 2022. Could you elaborate on what this means? Does that mean you want to circulate more books checked out from those branches? Does it mean you want those materials to be spread around to all libraries? Just elaborate on what that goal means exactly.
Sure. So when we talk about circulation, the way that we almost always mean it when we talk about it is, if somebody checks out a physical book, what library are they standing in when they check that book out? So when we talk about wanting to increase that at West Region branches, I want more books to be checked out on the self-check machines or at the circulation desk at the Shawnee branch and the Western branch and the Portland branch. And what we typically see in the utilization statistics for the library is that there are some branches where the book circulation numbers are high, but the computer utilization is not as high. There are other locations where the book circulation is lower, but the computer utilization is higher. And what we have historically seen at the libraries in the West region in our city is that the libraries are utilized more heavily for access to the technology, the internet, the printing, the faxing, the copying, and we see lower circulation numbers there. So I'm really committed to finding out what the root cause of that is. And it's unclear at this point, and we'll be engaging in some continuous improvement processes to find out. But is it that we're not buying the right materials? Is it that the community lacks access to the library, that the hours aren't right, or that there are transportation obstacles? Is it that that the community just isn't aware of the resources that are available at the library? So we are going to Six Sigma that and see what we can do to move the needle on the circulation numbers, because I believe that the more books you get out into the community and the more reading that takes place, the more school success you're going to see in that community.
And with that, I know some time ago, the Western branch really wanted to make sure they were protecting their inventory. We know the history of the Western branch being the first Black library in the country. And it's important with that significant history, you want to protect some of that inventory as far as the books go. To what extent does that exist for the other branches in West Louisville? And to what extent are you trying to make sure you protect that as you increase circulation? How do you increase the circulation without letting those books leave the community?
Sure. So the Western branch is a little different from every other branch in the community, with the possible exception of Maine, because in addition to their circulating collection, they have a large collection of African American history materials that reside all the time in the archive in the basement. And those materials can't be checked out by anyone in the community. So in terms of protecting that inventory, we do that. And many of those items are rare and would be really difficult to replace. We do that by not letting those items circulate. One of the concerns that a lot of our branch managers have, and it's not just limited to communities in West Louisville, it's often other small branches like our Fairdale branch, that we have a system in place where if you reserve an item, and if I want to check an item out at the Main library, but Main doesn't own a copy, but the Highland Shelby Park branch does, they will ship that book to the Main library and I can check it out here. And several years ago, we were seeing so many items come through the garage here at the Main library to be sorted and sent back out to the branch that they belong to, that we implemented a system called floating collections, which was kind of the trend at the time in public libraries, because everybody was dealing with that. And what that meant was that if you checked an item out at Main that had been sent from Highland Shelby Park, when you returned it, it wouldn't go back to Highland Shelby Park, it'd stay at Main. And what we saw over a number of years with that was that there are 2 or 3 branches where patrons are really active about placing holds and requesting things to be transferred. And that was having a negative impact on branches all across the system. So we've been adjusting our rules for floating, and one of the adjustments that we've made is that materials that are purchased for Shawnee, Western, or Portland don't ever float to another branch. When they're checked out, they always come back to that branch to go back on the shelf to be checked out. The other thing that we will continue to do, and there's been some confusion, not a lot, but I have heard some people who misunderstood, that we're doing away with overdue fines. And that does mean that you won't have to pay late fees when you return something late, but it does not mean that you are free to just keep that item forever. So items that are checked out after we've eliminated overdue fines, after they are overdue for a certain period of time, you'll be billed for the replacement cost of that. If you return that item, that find that replacement cost is removed from your account and we get the item back. So we'll continue to do due diligence to make sure that people return our items. As we continue to move forward and monitor the impact that turning off floating had on collections in the West Region libraries, we will also look at other things like making sure that we're replacing items that do get lost. And basically, if you read through those equity goals, we're going to be evaluating every aspect of our library system to make sure that we're distributing services, materials, branches, and staff as equitably as we can.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Fowler.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for being here today, Lee. It's a very informative session. So I have a question about the security or the temperature taking at the door and being required to sign in. And this is coming from someone who asked me to ask this question, so I can't say from personal experience that that's what I have seen. But I wanted to see if that was when that was going to end and why we have 2 security people doing that.
Sure. So you've gotten far enough in the weeds for me that one of your questions I'm probably not going to be able to answer, and that's why are there 2 security people doing it? I would have to talk to a branch manager or our manager of branch services to find out what the staffing needs for that are. What I can tell you is that as recently as earlier this week, I did have conversations with the HR department and the safety and health folks. And at present, it is still our understanding that we are required to comply with a requirement in the governor's Healthy at Work guidelines, which requires us to be prepared to assist local health officials if they need to do contact tracing on someone who visits our library. And it's pretty specific and says that it's not just the employees, but that it's the guests as well that we need to have that contact information for. So that's why we're collecting contact information still when people enter our buildings. And when I asked specifically about the temperature checking of patrons, because the Healthy at Work guidelines specify that you have to temperature check employees, but doesn't say patrons. I was told that there is an OSHA regulation that says that we need to be temperature checking patrons when they visit our libraries. I've not looked that up to confirm it, but that was the answer that I was given. So I would say we will stop doing those things as soon as we are told that we can stop doing them.
Okay, and the people that are doing the temperature taking, are those like, a security company, or are they personnel at the library?
I think it depends on the location and what time of day it is. We have a check-in desk, and it might be staffed by library staff sometimes. It might be staffed by security staff sometimes. The security people who are there, though, are contract personnel that are coming to the library from a contract that we awarded to Morgan Security to provide security personnel for all of our library branches.
Okay, well, thank you for that. I appreciate it, and hopefully that answered the person who asked me the question. Thank you for being here today.
And it may be different in different libraries. At Crescent Hill, there's only one person doing that work. It may be Southwest may be a different, bigger facility. Councilwoman George.
Thank you, Chair. And Lee, let me just say on behalf of Iroquois Beachmont neighbors, program had been sorely missed during COVID. It's really a gem in the community. Do I understand correctly that we spent about $1 million, just a little over $1 million in programming in this upcoming proposed budget?
It depends on how you think about programming. So library programming is often not an expense other than the staff that is there, right? So we'll do a story time, and the story time may have 30 kids there, so we provide construction paper and scissors and crayons, and we provide a staff person, but the most expensive thing there is the staff person. But there's not really a lot of cost involved in that. And then we will do large programs like when we do our STEAM Day at the South Central branch, or when we do our Harry Potter Potterpalooza at the main library. And there we may have more expenses because we're hiring contract performers or something like that. So I would have to, and if you're referring to a specific line item, please let me know what that is. But I would say that the total cost of programming for the library for the upcoming year will probably be a lot more than $1 million. It's just not necessarily broken out into specific line items because it's really a single person or a group of people delivering that program.
Okay, that makes sense. There is a line item for child and youth, child and young adult programs. So I guess I should have been specific to that. $1 million a year was for that population. I guess my other question is, how is that diversified across branches? So I think about some of our branches where I know, for instance, there's excellent ESL programming, both Iroquois as well as Bon Air. And I'm interested to know, like, how whatever is budgeted is then diversified across the system.
Sure. So we try to make sure that certain programs are offered at every branch. So for example, every branch is expected to offer preschool story times. Every branch is expected to offer an adult reading group. And at some locations, there may be enough people who want to attend those programs that there may be multiple editions of a story time throughout the day. So we have, every branch manager is responsible for the programming at their location, and we try to coordinate all of that and distribute the large scale programs that we do, like the Potterpalooza, to Maine and the 3 regionals to make sure that we're out in the community there. One of the other key ways that we try to make sure that we are providing programming that is reaching every neighborhood in our community is through our bookmobile and our adult outreach programs. And those really do target specific neighborhoods, specific daycare centers, and specific schools. But this is an area where, if you look at our equity statement goals for the upcoming year, I think we can and ought to do more to make sure that we are investing enough money in all of the communities in our neighborhood and finding out reasons why, if we're not having the same attendance at story time in one neighborhood that we're having in another, that we find out what the root causes of that are, whether it's scheduling or whether it's transportation, and that we figure out how to solve those problems. Because it's clear when you look at the data that though we may be equitably offering the resources, the utilization of the resources is not always equitable, and sometimes not nearly as equitable as we would like it to be.
So that leads into my last question, and that really is around, I heard you mention in response to Councilman Arthur that there is a concern about how folks are aware around really. Can you hear me?
We lost you for just a minute, so you may want to start there. Okay. There is a concern around.
Okay. Yeah, I heard you mention a concern around how folks are aware of resources in the library. And so my question is there a line item in the budget that really gets to that marketing piece that you were talking about, or that outreach piece?
So there definitely is a line item around the outreach piece, but that again would be personnel costs, where we have people like some of the staff at the Iroquois branch and a staff person who is focused on West Louisville, who are out in the community on a regular basis, reaching out to those folks. As far as a line item for sort of public relations and marketing, we don't really have a robust line item in our budget for that. We used to have, and when I say used to, a couple of decades ago, I think we would have typically a $30,000 to $50,000 line item in our budget that was used for paid airtime. When our budget started getting tighter, that was, of course, one of the first things that we removed. But we have been working with the Library Foundation over the past few months, and they have been funding a public relations campaign. And you may have seen the advertisements in the Courier Journal or the Leo magazine or Louisville magazine. And we have been going through a strategic planning process with the Library Foundation. Today was our first day of strategic planning retreat. Tomorrow is our second day. And part of what we hope will come out of that is a better plan for how the foundation and the library can collaborate together to solve some of these problems of people not being aware of resources that are available in the community. They seem willing to fund that, and I'm willing to let them pay for it.
So it sounds like a good use of funds, and I'm glad to hear that that's also part of the work that you're doing around equity. So thank you.
Thank you. I just have a couple of follow-ups. There's a constituent who's been sending lots of emails about story times. When do story times resume, Lee?
Story times resume following the summer reading kickoff. So there's a lot of anticipation built up around our restarting story times, and I don't want to get too far into the weeds, but take, for example, our St. Matthews branch or our J-Town branch, where we might have a story time and there might be 80 families or 80 people, a combination of adults or caregivers and children who show up for that. And so part of what we're trying to do is make sure that when we start back our in-person story times, first of all, that we're able to start them equitably. We don't want to just have story times available in one part of the community. We want to restart that program all across the community. But the second thing is we don't want it to be a frustration for the people who attend. So we are trying to ramp up a reservation system where we can try to control crowds until such time as those sorts of measures are not necessary and we can have 100 people all in a story time room at one of our branches. So we're having our first in-person program on June 5th, and in the days following that, I hope that there will be numerous announcements of other opportunities for beautiful children like that one to come and participate in lap-sit story times. Perfect timing, thank you.
Well, there'll be a lot of people anxious for that. I don't see anyone else in the queue. I did promise to do this. Councilman Piagentini has called this a spiel, but I'm glad he has been listening. So, I totally agree that when I said, can you do everything, I meant, can you do what you're currently doing? I think it's important to know that we could do a lot more in library services with more funding. And I think it's important to note that we benchmark ourselves against 15 libraries in cities that have relatively similar funding streams. And the most recent Benchmark Cities Library report, of those 15, the average rank for LFPL across the 15 metrics is 12.3, which is the 15th lowest average ranking out of 16 library systems, with Memphis being the lowest. And I always find this even more astonishing. Among the other counties in Kentucky, and this is measuring things like total income per capita, local government income per capita, books per capita, circulation per capita, square feet of library space per capita. In that report, LFPL ranked in the 4th, that's the bottom quartile, on 3 metrics. The bottom quartile among Kentucky counties, total income per capita, local government income per capita, and books per capita. And on the other 2 metrics, circulation and square feet of library space per capita, we ranked in the 3rd quartile. That's the bottom half. I think it's important to hear those statistics. They're not very pleasant, but I think you can't improve until you know where you are. Many of those libraries in Kentucky are funded with particular library taxing districts, and of course we're not. But again, you do remarkable work with the funding that you have available. I would love to see you be able to get more, and I hope that we could potentially do that. It has to come from somewhere, of course, but we appreciate, all of us, I think, appreciate all that you do. I don't see anyone else in the queue. Let me check one more time, but I don't see anyone else in the queue. So Lee, thank you to you and to your whole team. Please pass along all of our thanks for all of the work that you've done over this extraordinarily difficult year. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's always a pleasure to be here with you.
We will take a 5-minute break. Metro TV be in recess for 5 minutes. We'll start back up at 5:12 with Parks and Recreation. We're in recess. Thank you.
Mr. Kessler, can you hear me?
I can. Can you hear me?
Did you hear me? I was asking who would be sharing your screen for your presentation.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Margaret Brosco will.
Okay, thank you so much. And yes, I heard you very well.
Okay, good.
Do you mind if I just pull it up just to make sure you can see it and everything's going as